Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Dave, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Fellow podcaster. It's great to exchange episodes. I appreciate you having me on your show recently. That was really awesome.
No, hey, listen, veterans helping veterans and, people doing great things in the construction industries where we're at today. So nothing like having both together.
Absolutely. Totally agreed. Where are you calling in from? Where's home base for you?
Yeah, I am in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Good old.
Awesome.
It rains more here than Portland or Seattle.
Oh, yeah? I didn't know that.
It's driving me absolutely nuts.
Wow, I wouldn't have guessed, actually. That's interesting that Seattle gets the rep for rain, but seemingly you get more.
Yeah, Pittsburgh gets it all the time. It's at least lately anyhow. I don't know. They talk about climate, warming and all this and global warming, and it's been cold and rainy. So normally it's 70s, 80s all the time. But yeah, man, let's hop into it.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, we're going to kick off with two questions. First is if your kid or kids ask you that they want to join the military, what do you do? What's your reaction?
Yeah, I say it's up to them. I wouldn't be more proud if they did do it. I don't think the military is for everybody, but I do think everybody should serve somehow. But for my kids, 100%, I'm all about it. I think it teaches them things that they're just not going to get in college or in school. And work ethics are like no other once you go in the military.
Yep, love that. Awesome. Second question, which is kind of like a rolling thought, I'm really curious to hear your feedback on is obviously naturally when a veteran comes into a civilian workforce, there's a cultural gap and vice versa, right? For civilians to veterans and veterans to civilians. How do you see us better bridging that cultural gap?
Yeah. I mean, listen, there has to be programs. I mean, even I remember when I came out of the service, I like just trying even to figure out what tie went with a suit for an interview is stressful, right? Because my underwear was brown, my fatigues were brown or green, depending on where we were in the world. But, I think, I think the corporate world, could do a better job with some of their, in processing of veterans that are coming out of the military. Not to think that the military shouldn't do a better job, but there should be some more programs in place.
Yeah, agreed. I do feel that has increased recently. I hope that's the case, and I hope it continues to improve in terms of just general awareness and transitioning veterans. So yeah, totally with you.
Yeah, it's stressful. It is. It is beyond stressful when you get out of the military and you're trying to find your way in the civilian world.
Yeah, and that's something we'll dive into a bit later when we get to that point in your life story. So we're gonna do a life story. Everyone starts off with an introduction. So I'm gonna kick off with yours. Dave Cooper served 9 years in the United States Army as a combat medic with multiple deployments to Southeast and Southwest Asia hotspots. Dave is a top combat medic competition winner and a September 11th World Trade Center survivor and rescue worker, where he performed body recovery during one of our nation's darkest hours. After his military service, Dave spent 20 years as a builder and developer in New England, specializing in panelized modular and mass timber construction. Today, as the host of Dave Cooper Live, Dave has become one of the leading global voices in industrialized construction, conducting over 3,000 interviews with the who's who of the AEC industry. Dave works directly with industry leaders, suppliers, and governments worldwide, helping them adopt modern construction methods and navigate the next wave of building technology. Simply put, he's become a super connector for the people and companies that are building it better. Awesome, Dave. Let's start off with childhood. Where'd you grow up? What was childhood like for you?
Yeah, born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Typical, blue collar style family. So high school wasn't my thing. Today you can't go in school and walk out the back door, but back then you could go into school and walk out the back door. I wasn't a troubled kid, but I definitely pushed the envelope quite a bit. And I have to tell you, I had a pretty good childhood overall. But the stress of school and I learned by seeing and doing versus, taking a test would stress me out. But yeah, high school was great. And from that point, when I was there, I should say, um, then I joined the military right after high school. I needed to. The judge said so.
What was kind of happening that brought military on your radar?
Yeah, I really didn't have a plan, right? I knew
Mhm.
I didn't make the grades to go to college. I just didn't have it. I wasn't skilled at fixing cars or any of those things. I was framing houses in the summers, in winters in PA, and that kind of told me I didn't want to do this for a living, right? There's nothing like walking sill plates at 6:37 in the morning when they're icy, and it's cold as hell. But yeah, it was really kind of my only choice for, what I wanted to do. My grandfather was a World War II
Mm.
veteran, Guadalcanal, South Pacific, several deployments with him as well. So it's been in our culture all along, and the stories have been there. And it was kind of just probably like a lot of people, I got to do something. And that's
Mm.
what and saw the recruiters.
So did your I'm really intrigued by, that generation in general.
Mhm.
Did your grandfather tell you stories of his service?
Yeah, all the time. In fact, usually we would go when I got out of when I come home from the army, we'd go down to the VFW, which a
Mm.
lot of the veterans did, the older veterans. But yeah, my grandfather has the first confirmed kill in Guadalcanal, believe it or not,
Wow.
according to the Johnstown newspaper. So I mean, that's all I could go by, right? Because I mean, it's not like they had social media back then. But yeah, he did serve. He was shot 3 times, stabbed through the hand with a bayonet.
Wow.
And so always walked with a crooked neck because he got blown up pretty good and was never able to straighten out his neck after the war.
Mm. That's pretty amazing because typically you hear that, grandparents are not speaking about their service whatsoever. So for you to have, been able to hear and absorb that,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It didn't start until myself and my brother, were in the military.
Mm.
That's kind of when it started. And we could go sit down the VFW or American Legion, get a couple beers in them, and a lot of times it ended in tears, so,
Yeah.
for him. But I will tell you, it was probably later in life that I started to really understand the impact of what those guys have done, especially once you get deployed yourself.
Sure. Absolutely. So obviously you just mentioned, yeah, you have a brother that served as well. Is he older or younger?
No, he's 3 years younger. And unfortunately, he joined the Marine Corps.
Okay. Yeah. So walk us. I'm guessing you might have been influence on his
Yeah.
service.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think it was the same thing. Like I said,
Sure.
we didn't have a lot of money as kids, growing up, and and we weren't really good in school. We both had, some learning disabilities, as they would say, reading comprehension and things like that. Maybe that's why I like video so much. You put a spreadsheet in front of me, I turn into a possum and roll over and freeze. But yeah, no, I think it was kind of on our radar, really, just from the stories from my
Mm.
grandfather, especially when my brother was hanging out when I came home from boot camp and AIT, we'd get
Yeah.
together, and somewhere along there when he graduated, he said he wanted to join, and that's how it happened.
Mm. So walk us through that process. You go to the recruiter. Did you know you wanted to go Army? Did you like go to different recruiters? What was that like?
Yeah, no, it's like anything. I took my ASVAB test, and I went and talked to the Marine Corps, talked to the Air Force, talked to the Army. Was not getting me on no ship, so that helped me eliminate the Marine Corps pretty quick. But yeah, so when I took my ASVAB, believe it or not, I scheduled high enough to be a combat medic or
Mm.
something, mechanical. And that's just kind of how it happened. I'm like, all right, that's cool. I'll be a medic. I'll work in a hospital. That didn't work.
So walk us through process of enlisting, going through boot camp.
Yeah. So, it's kind of funny. And I think a lot of guys and girls go through this. When I signed up, I ended up, I was the delayed entry program I was on.
Mhm.
Right. I got in trouble, and my recruiter went with me to see the judge. Right. And the judge looked at me and goes, Mr. Cooper, you're going to get on a bus today. You're either getting on that bus over there. And he pointed to the sheriff. He goes, or you're getting on his bus, but you're getting on a bus. So that's how my journey started. Which I'm grateful that he forced it, forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I went to basic training in Kentucky. So
Mhm.
old Ironsides down there, Fort Stewart. And then shit, man, I was at AIT at Fort Sam. And I mean, the rest is history for that matter. I think the most prominent thing that I remember from boot camp is that, first or second night where you sit there and they cut all your hair off, took all your stuff away. They've been yelling at you. It's not like today. It's a little different, I think, but maybe not. I remember I put my hands, between my head, and I put my head down between my legs, and I started tearing up. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? I think
Well,
we all have that feeling when we first get there, like, holy shit, what did I do? Nonetheless,
you
9 years
you
later.
chose the right bus, is what you did.
Yeah, I did choose the right bus.
So walk us through kind of what that pipeline looks like for a combat medic. So you go basic, obviously, then from there, where do you go?
Yeah, so you go to basic. I said Fort Knox, but I was stationed in Fort Stewart as well. But no, you go basic. I went to Fort Knox. I think it was 90 days boot camp back then, right? I mean, listen, we're going back 35 years now. It's funny how much you forget. Did
Sure,
my
yeah.
time there, and then they flew me out to wonderful San Antonio, Texas, to Fort Sam Houston, and that's where all the medics do their combat training.
Hmm. And did you have like any general inclination to being a medic prior, or that just happened to be the opportunity that
It
came
was
came
it
to you?
was it was just the opportunity.
Yeah,
I had
interesting.
no inclination of it. I'm like, that sounds cool. Blood and guts didn't
Yeah.
scare me, that type of thing. So that's how I ended up choosing it.
Yeah, cool. So walk us through what you remember from combat medic training.
Yeah, Fort Sam, it wasn't horrible, but it was really intensive, right? Because you
Mhm.
had to go through your basic medical training, right? Basically, you're getting your EMT qualifications, I think is what they'll call it in the civilian world today.
Mm.
But then it went a little bit step further where we would actually, have to do combat scenario training. You'd walk through triage training. You'd pull people out of tanks, out of helicopters, out of planes. Um, and but I think overall it was a great experience. Got my first tattoo on the Riverwalk down in San Antonio. Got yelled at for that too, because who knows, that was defacing government property.
That's funny. And
Yeah.
through that training experience, anything kind of stand out in memory? Obviously, that's out of that story.
I think that, well, the biggest thing that stood out, we had our first weekend of Liberty, and I remember I had a Steve Austin, not the Steve Austin that wrestles, but Steve Austin. I went with him to his farm. He had a heifer farm or a cattle farm in New Mexico, and I'll never forget it. After about a 6-pack of beer, I said, "All right, I'll try the bull." It was just a little baby one. I couldn't walk for a week, dude. That's if you want my most memorable, I thought I was gonna die. I don't know how these guys ride those big things, but yeah, I mean, it's like anything else when you go through the training, right? And you graduate. I think it's my brothers and sisters who I met, that's really, I think, what sticks
Mm.
out the most, right? Because you go through things together. It's not easy. Fire ants suck when you're doing sit-ups in San Antonio and, the sun's not up and you lay right in the fire nest, but I mean, the basic stuff is, yeah, I think it all comes down to, who's to the left and who's to the right of you.
Hmm. And how does that work when you finish training? I'm guessing you get assigned to a different team, meaning you're not necessarily with who you went through training with.
Yeah, 100%. So, it's like you just get your orders.
Hmm.
They call your name, say, hey, Cooper, you're going to 369th Armor Battalion, Fort Stewart, Georgia. Okay. That's where I ended
Hmm.
up going. So was put in a tank platoon in the headquarters, and then we would get deployed with the scouts and, the tankers and infantry. And, similar to that, the Marines have their corpsman, right? The corpsman just goes with whatever unit they send them out with.
Hmm. And how is that integration process like? Because obviously you're getting attached to a different team who you didn't, train or know prior.
Yeah, listen, you're the new guy, no matter where you're at. You got to prove yourself. But I think a lot of people know, like when you get in the service, you got some high performers, then you got the slackers, then you got the guys that don't shower, right? But yeah, I think it's like anything else. It's you just get into it. Time goes pretty quick, on most
Hmm.
occasions with it, but um, you get assigned and you roll out, and for the first couple of weeks, I'd be working with the platoon sergeant or one of our squad leaders, and then from there you just get turned loose depending on who you're going to get attached with.
Hmm. So walk us through, you get attached to that battalion. What are kind of like the next phases of your service?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like everybody, I went in 1989, and never thought Desert Storm, Desert Shield was gonna, kick off, because I joined for the college money, as everybody else says, right? I'm not supposed to go to war. But yeah, so when I stayed at the 24th Infantry Division, 369th Armored Battalion, in Fort Stewart for about 3.5, almost 4 years. So we did a deployment over 90, 91. Then I was back again in 94 for Vigilant Warrior. Most of my time, my first deployment, I was on patrol out with the scouts, right? Because we were a mechanical tank unit, so we would drive in. We used to have these 113s, which were the old Vietnam, escort vehicles. You shake your head like you probably know what I'm talking about, right? But the scout, the Bradleys, and I mean, they could just fly so fast, and we could never keep up because we're just like chucking along, right? Trying to keep up with them. But yeah, I mean, it was I was over there for about 9 months on that first deployment, and just rolled all the way through Iraq, basically. Most of my time was really patching up other people, not on our team.
Yeah, I see. So like, did you have like a day-to-day mission set, or where you're essentially just ad hoc wherever needed?
Yeah, so when you roll out with a battalion unit or a tank platoon, right, or a scout platoon, you're going on that mission with that unit. Typically during the deployment, you'll stay with that same unit. So whenever they roll, you roll. That way the camaraderie builds. You get to know the people. You get to know who takes care of themselves, who doesn't, but, we do get switched up here and again, depending on what's going on. I mean, there's times where we'd come back in and somebody else is going out and we'd be short and they would send us right back out again. So, but for the most part, yeah, you'd stay with the same platoon.
Yeah, got it. Okay. So in those 3 or 4 years with that battalion, I think that's what you said. Like fleshing out if there were any other kind of memorable experiences, whether it be deployments or coming back and redeploying.
If you want to know the thing that keeps me up at night from those deployments, right? You would think it would be, the death and destruction. But the honest to God truth, it has to do with that. We set up, our bivouac. The Mike 88s come roll up a perimeter around us, and it was just after a fight, and fucking Camel got its leg cracked, right, or whatever, by a shell or shot, and that thing laid there all night just moaning. Couldn't go get it. Couldn't leave the perimeter. And I tell you, for whatever reason, the screams of that Camel bother me more, than anything else later in life. And I don't know why that is, but that's the thing that keeps me up at night, that effing Camel.
Sure.
Have you ever heard that? Right?
Wild.
I'm probably the only one out there that remembers the damn Camel screaming, whining all night long. But listen, your adrenaline's going, you're on edge, right? You don't know what's happening and what's coming, and a camel screaming also, adds noise, which means you're not hearing as clearly as you could hear if there was no camel screaming.
Yeah, I think I've certainly heard, like, a camel in particular, I don't think I've heard, but I've heard other animals in general, whether it be like a horse or a dog, for example. So I don't think that's, some like crazy out of line thing I haven't heard before. And yeah, it's just interesting, looking in hindsight, or thinking, in hindsight, how different, experiences impact long term, different people. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. So after you finish with this battalion, where do you go from there?
Yeah, so after that, I ended up, I stayed in the 24th Infantry Division, but I was attached then to the 1st Ranger Battalion out of Hunter Army Airfield as a support medic for them. So I was doing life flight medic back then with those guys. So yeah, it was actually probably the coolest thing of my deployment period was just watching these guys perform and what they do, and being able to actually go and do things with them. Not full on with them, but they loved you enough because you're the only thing that's going to bring them home alive if something happens. So it was actually really cool. But we'd support their medics in between. If they go out on deployment, somebody gets hurt, their medics aren't coming all the way back. So we almost ended up being like that middle ground for them if we couldn't get all the way back to the TOC.
And how long were you attached to them?
Almost 2 years. Yeah, so, just about 2 years attached with them and deploying. So yeah, it was actually pretty cool. I mean, we were in South Africa, we were in Panama. I got to go to some really cool places with.
Awesome. And anything in that kind of 2-year span that you want to reminisce on, recall?
Yeah,
in particular.
You know what? There's really not a whole lot for me on that one that I think your listeners would find helpful. Everybody knows what happened, in South Africa, Somalia, and in Panama. I was more in a support role, but didn't have to go in
Mhm.
with them to get them.
Okay, yeah.
Just a whole
So,
lot of waiting around.
okay, yeah. I mean, even in the support role, though, like, did you see and or experience the support of aftermath, or not even?
Yes, so we did, right, and but it was more on the transport, right,
Hmm.
but not on a high level. I wasn't up in flight. I wasn't on a helicopter. I
Yeah.
love to say it was something more than it was, but the reality of it was more just grabbing the litters as they were brought in and then running them into the medical facility.
Hmm. Support is support. I mean, that's obviously critical and a
Yeah,
necessity, no matter what. Yeah.
it takes everybody, man.
Exactly. Exactly. So after that attachment, after those 2 years, where was next for you?
Yeah, I stayed at the 24th Infantry Division for really most of my
Hmm.
entire career. So, which was great. So I was back in the headquarter platoon. After that deployment, came back. That's when we ended up going back to. Most people don't know this. Vigilant Warrior. You ever hear of Vigilant Warrior?
No, I haven't. No.
Vigilant Warrior happened 94, 95.
Hmm.
94, 95. The Saddam Hussein lined all of his troops back up in the border. We were wheels up 72 hours back on the front line in Iraq at that point.
Mm.
Which for a show of force, which you know kind of sucked, dude. I was sitting with my girlfriend at a at a beauty pageant. We're in Georgia, so beauty pageants were a big
Right.
thing, and I'll never forget. And you got to be within your 40-minute radius of getting back to
Yeah.
the post, because we're rapid deployment. I was a good hour and 15 minutes away, thinking we just got back. We're not going to deploy. Lo and behold, her dad came up, tapped me on the shoulder, and I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" And that was it.
Wow.
72 hours
Yeah.
later, we were wheels up and in the desert again. We
Yeah.
flew into Kuwait, so Camp Doha was our base for that.
Hmm. And what was going on? Like, what was going on there? What was that like?
So, it's like anything else. If any of your listeners were in a tank platoon or anything, you show up, you go to the motor pool, you have the DOD contractors there, and they're issuing you equipment. You're not using your own vehicles, you're not using your own
Hmm.
tanks or any of that stuff. And you just rev them up, and it's kind of a shit show, quite honestly.
Mm.
A lot of the lieutenants, commanders, platoon sergeants, they have a general idea, but nothing's really fleshed out yet. And we went, and I'll never forget it. First day out, we ended up in a minefield, and it's dark because we're traveling at night. And I'll never forget, we're sitting there. We put the back of the 113 down, and we're using our Kevlar to shovel sandbags so we can layer the floor of the vehicle. But luckily enough, they actually sent somebody in because it was a known minefield.
Mm.
How we ended up there, I wasn't driving, but it wasn't just me. It was about 5 or 6 vehicles that were in that
Wow.
space, but it wasn't clearly marked. Went up to the border and just sat for 3
Mm.
months. Just
Yeah.
sat. There was some cross border activity going, but it wasn't involving us.
Mm. Yeah. Sometimes that's what the job is.
Yeah, but hey, listen, man, you're on edge, you're fully loaded, you're ready to
Hmm.
go. But yeah,
So
for
does
sure.
that bring you to like kind of the end of your service, or was there another rotation?
No, it does. So that was my last deployment, right? Because it was kind of quiet up until 2001 again.
Hmm.
So it was just your regular missions, a lot of support missions, doing your NTC training out in the desert and Fort Irwin and all that fun stuff. But no, that kind of wraps it up until I got out of the service.
So obviously we just kind of blew through 9 years of service, which I don't want to do it in injustice, and that is a lot of time. Kind of overall, what are, I don't know, successes, wins, things that were just like really neat experiences for you, especially in that role as a medic.
Yeah. So when you say successes or wins, my first deployment, I it's kind of hard, I don't know if you've deployed, but it's kind of hard to kind of put into words, right? And it's
Hmm.
not something that we speak about all the time. You speak with your buddies
Correct.
and when we get together. Um, and a lot of it, I'm like probably like a lot of other people, I've kind of suppressed it. I really haven't talked about it since this
Yeah.
show. I mean, this
Hmm.
is going back, quite some time. But since then, and I'll get back to your question. I've had 2 platoon buddies, commit suicide,
Mm.
right? And for whatever reason. But to me, I think the wins were winning top combat medic was an awesome thing for me, right?
Yeah.
Because I never thought it, me really, but I ended up winning it. And I would say that the biggest thing for me is what I learned and what I've learned that I could carry on into this life.
Hmm.
When you're in, you don't get it.
Yeah.
This is all shit that you get when you get out, and you get to the real world. And I think it actually set me up for what happened, at the trade centers. And I know we'll get into that as well.
Hmm.
But overall, I got the best friends I could ever have. Best friends I can ever have. Now they're all not, with us today, and some of them are in bad shape, just trying to keep their mental stability together. But that's probably the biggest win out of all this, man. Just knowing who has your six, and not realizing that your high school friends are important, but your military friends really become the bond of your life.
Mm. Yeah, well said. I completely relate to what you're saying. And part of, a purpose of the show is to kind of like bring these things to light and try and, pull it out so other people can hear and
Yeah.
relate if you're a veteran and or better understand if you're connected to a veteran, right? So, I'm 100% with you. I myself struggle with kind of bringing it to light as well, experiences to light. That said, I think probably an easy one that I did want to touch on, I'm glad you reminded me, is that the combat medic, top combat medic. Sorry, forgot that title. Yeah. Talk to us about what that kind of situation was like, that competition, and how winning was.
Yeah, so that was it was similar, kind of like to the Best Ranger Challenge, but not as I wasn't having to do high wire feats and all that shit. But yeah, no, top medic was kind of like if people out there went through their expert field medical badge training, right, or with a combat medical, get your extra badges or what have you. It was actually, it's stressful for a guy who doesn't like to read. Right, because with the top medic, you had to go in front of the sergeant major and the colonel and everybody else, right? And you stand there and they drill you. No different than when you're looking to get promoted, right? You got to go in there and they ask you questions and see if you've done your homework. It's the same thing when you were doing the top combat medic, right? There would be scenarios that they would give you. How would you react? How would you do triage? How would you, do a chest tube? What would be first? The whole dime technique where you got to, triage and decide, in the civilian world, the person that's hurt most typically is the one to be saved. But in the military world, it's about, getting the fighting force back out in the field, so it's just different. But, yeah, I mean, it was pretty intense, 13-mile road marches, coming into different scenarios, different combat scenarios, litter carries, fireman carries. How do you roll them up onto your shoulders? I mean, everything you could imagine when you're going for, a certain type of badge or award. The one thing that I had back then that I think helped give me the edge is I just have a shit ton of endurance, man. I like to run marathons, and, it was always easy to me, even when I was younger. So, I think that was my biggest win during that time, because I wasn't the strongest kid. I still got a baby face, right? Even for my age now.
Correct. Yeah. No, but I totally agree. Endurance is really the key in pretty much anything you're doing military wise. It's all about just keep going, grind it out for sure. That's really cool. So did you know that was coming up and you kind of prepared for it, or it just happenstance, opportunity was there and you just went?
Quite honestly, Sergeant Fulton said, "Cooper, you're going to try the top." They were picking. You had to send your best from your platoons or whatever. So no, I didn't know I was going. In fact, I was out in the field training, and then he came out and he goes, "Get your shit. You're going back in." I'm like, "What do you mean I'm going back in?" That's how it happened. So yeah, no, I did not volunteer for it. Same thing with Air Assault School. I did not. It's just I got picked a lot, but yeah. It was cool, and I had a good relationship with the NCOs and the lieutenant, and also our PA, physician assistants, and doctors that were with us.
Mhm.
So looking back on it, I understand why I got picked,
Mm.
but I think anybody in my platoon could have done it.
When you say looking back, you understand why. What are those kind of like key, I don't know, components that you remember?
Yeah, you know what? I just had like I need to do things a certain way. I'm
Mm.
very particular about how I kept my vehicle, how I kept my aid bag,
Yeah.
just very methodical on things. And back then it's all about sending somebody that has their shit together so you don't
Mhm.
embarrass the platoon as well. And I was kind of I don't know, the sergeant's pet, I would say. And if you were looking like,
Yeah.
but I always seemed to get chosen for certain things, which was a blessing and a curse. It's more of a blessing now that I'm older, but when I was in,
Yeah.
it's not what I wanted to do. I'd rather be sitting in my bivouac and bullshitting with the guys. But yeah, I got really lucky. I spent a lot of time at headquarters. I spent a lot of time doing battle plans, doing
Mhm.
movement plans. Back then, we didn't have digital anything. We had to retrace the maps and,
Mhm.
hand all the maps to the different, medics going out with the different platoons and stuff. But, and I also, most of my time, I was actually sleeping in the headquarters tent if I
Mm.
wasn't out in the field with the scouts or any of the other tank platoons.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very understandably so awesome characteristic that put you in those positions, which is being methodical with everything you do, and that for sure shows to whoever your command is. So totally tracks with me. Yeah, I heard you mention air assault school. That's a pretty cool one. Any memories on that?
What, just my left foot hitting the ground and having to say air assault every time my left foot hit? No, no. Yeah, no, air assault. Well, if you want to know the worst memory that I have there, one of the folks that was in our, we were in a GP medium or something tent and ended up having bed bugs.
Mm.
I think it was
Not
bed
fun.
bugs or lice. Dude, we all had to clear out. Like it was a mess. Um, But hey, listen, air assault school was really cool. In air assault school, you spend so much time learning how to sling load,
Mhm.
right? That's kind of the main thing. I mean, yes, you learn how to rappel out of helicopters, and but it was really geared. And for me, it was great being a medic because I could set up an LZ pretty quick.
Mhm.
So you learn how to set up an LZ, you learn how to sling load vehicles, safely without getting killed by the static. And the cool stuff is you get to rappel out of helicopters, you get to fly around in the Blackhawks,
Yep.
but yeah, I think from that experience, like there is no fucking up, as if I can swear on your podcast, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but there's no screwing up, so to speak, right? You got to have
Mhm.
your shit together when you're doing it. But that did come in very handy for me in the desert,
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
you know.
Cool. So yeah. Any other kind of school or experience that you wanna, I don't know, reminisce on?
Yeah, from the military, it's kind of funny, dude. I haven't thought about this shit in so long.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, so listen, I went for my expert field medical badge, right? Obviously, you
Mhm.
get your combat medical badge when you're over and deployed. Um, if you want to know a story about when I went for that, Fort
Yeah.
Benning, Georgia, is where I had to do my nightland navigation at.
Mhm.
You ever see those stick bugs?
I believe
Like
so,
the
yeah. I
long
think I know what
stick
you're talking
bugs
about.
with the
Yeah.
long, their legs look like sticks. So we're doing our night land nav test, and I'm out there. And back then we had red flashlights, right, with our
Mhm.
greenish colored map, so you can see. And I sat there and I'm trying to get my reverse location, and I'm looking, and then something came over the top of my Kevlar and touched my nose. Yeah, dude, all military bearing right out the window.
Yeah.
Okay, through my Kevlar. Like, what the hell is that? But if you ever served in Fort Benning or in Georgia, man, you walk through the woods. I mean, the spiders are the size of your hand
Right.
sometimes, right?
Right. Yeah,
Like it's
exactly.
just, and I know they won't hurt you. But I just can't stand. Give me a snake all day long. I want nothing to do with spiders.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, especially when it catches you off guard. And if you're trying to be concentrating on something
Yeah,
and it pops up on your face, wow, man, that's I'm with you. I would have a similar reaction for sure.
yeah. But that's probably my funniest moment. And luckily,
Yeah.
nobody saw me because I had to turn on my white light to find my
Yeah.
Kevlar. Because I threw it, I got my hand covering up, and I'm trying not to have too much of a glow. But yeah, it all worked out. I got recycled one time through that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
recycled one time.
But what kind of, like, I don't know, hindsight advice would you think help you get through that better? So to not
Um,
recycle.
Yeah, I think taking it more seriously.
Okay, yeah.
You know, like before I went, like spending a little bit more time studying.
Hmm.
It was a medical knowledge thing that got me recycled.
Hmm.
You know, and so like I told you, I hate reading.
Yeah.
I know you're going to ask me about a book, but I did listen to it. But I think from my angle, really, listen, the military is all about, the paperwork and knowing the rules.
Hmm.
And if you know the paperwork, if you know the rules in the military, you can maneuver your way around anywhere you want to go.
Yeah.
You know, you have some people go in and everything's a fight and an Article 15 or extra duty versus truly understanding how to work the system. And it's like anything else in life. I mean, if you start understanding the system, then it's like politicians, right? You can start figuring your way through to get what
Hmm.
you want and get to where you want.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Awesome. So in kind of getting toward the end of your service, what mindset did you have? What started, allowing you to think, okay, I'm gonna finish here, go on to next stage in life?
You know what it was? Just being a young man, and I have
Hmm.
friends that are already graduated college. They're married with kids. I was rapid deployment, so it was all, you always felt like your wheels up and
Hmm.
going. It's also Hinesville, Georgia, and Fort's. Like it's a military towny town, right?
Yeah.
So we had Savannah and Hunter right there, which was nice. But looking back on it, I wish I would have stayed probably the next 11. Maybe not
Yeah.
be here after what happened, right? Because
Hmm.
the combat missions really picked up since Desert Storm. But I think for me, yeah, I kind of regret not staying in my full 20. Um, but on the other side, it was. Listen, I was a young guy, and I was thinking more about getting back into the world, and I can do better than I can do here, and wanted to chase girls, all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really interesting. I kind of have the same, I don't know, headspace where, and you mentioned this before in terms of like you pick up those skills after, right? Like you don't necessarily realize what's happening as you're going through service. Rather, when you look at hindsight, you can pull from those lessons learned and push them forward, leverage them
Yeah,
forward. I kind of feel like that was the same in a certain, in a similar way, same dynamic in terms of looking back. Oh, I wish I stayed in longer because it's just a great, in hindsight, it's a great time in life. At least I think so.
it is. You know what? You don't see it when you're in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah,
when you got to get
exactly.
out and start doing it the civilian way and put food on the table and
Yeah,
like there's nobody better than the people you serve with
yeah,
and nobody can tell me different on that because I've been in the corporate world when I got out for a little bit and others and it's
yeah.
just not the same. So I'm
I
with you
agree.
there.
Yep, totally agreed. So as you're finishing, did you have like where was your head at? You were just trying to finish, or did you have a plan of any sort?
I had no plan. So I mean,
Hmm.
you got me thinking now, right? So when I was in the service, I ended up doing. I got a 2 year degree doing night school, weekends and
Mm.
nights, which a lot of the military bases have. They have a partnership with the colleges. Mine was St. Leo's, and I got a liberal arts degree out of that, which is good for nothing, but I got one, right? Because you
It's a
needed a
degree.
degree back then.
Degree is a
Um,
degree.
yeah. So I still didn't know what I wanted to do or where I was going to go.
Mhm.
I wanted to stay in the medical field. So I thought, I started applying for PA school, physician
Mhm.
assistant schools. I got accepted to one in Beckley, West Virginia. But I can't remember now why, but I never went. I don't know if it was the money or, probably more the money.
Mhm.
I decided I wanted just to work. And luckily enough, I had an aunt that lived in Alabama, and she at the time was her husband passed away, my uncle Jerry, but she was with another gentleman, and I was going, back then we went to the newspaper to find jobs. I keep saying back then like I'm that old, but and it's funny. It says, oh, well, you need a master's degree for this, or you need, a doctorate degree for this position. And I was looking at medical equipment sales, and it was kind of funny. He looked at me and he goes, "Listen, people will hire you if they like you.
Mm.
Don't look at what that says. Just put your resume in." And lo and behold, I did, and that's how I ended up, transitioning,
Mm.
from the military for the most part with
Yeah.
Johnson and Johnson.
I mean, just taking it face value, it to me that does make sense to hire you, right? Having a background in military, background in medical space,
Yeah.
generally speaking, and then go into being able to sell that. I don't know, that sounds aligned to me.
Right. But we don't think of ourselves that way, right? I was
Sure,
just, I
sure.
was just a
Sure.
grunt medic in the service. But, it's good that somebody else was able to point that out for me because
Yeah.
I would never have done it. Listen, we're rule followers. I'm like, oh, well, says you got to have that badge to do that. And I don't
Right.
have that badge. So they're not going to let me in the officers club because I'm enlisted.
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
That's by the way, that's I think a really important thing to point out in general for veteran service members to understand is that, all of these job listings, even today, right? They just have all these crazy criteria. I think largely you just don't have to necessarily listen or abide by it. Rather, just apply and do
Yeah.
your best, kind of, put yourself out there.
All
Yeah.
I can say is no.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
All I can say
Exactly.
is no. And the guy that hired me at J&J, Dave Drake, I'll never forget it, dude. He looks at me, he goes, listen, if human resources ever asked for this stuff, say you gave it to me, somehow I lost it. And it was your only copy. Okay.
That's great.
But then you get in and perform and nobody thinks the wiser.
Right. Yep.
They
exactly.
don't care as long as you're performing.
Exactly. So talk to us a little bit about, like kind of a step back, talk to us a little bit about that transition. So you're finishing your service,
Yeah.
you're starting to roll, what kind of a time frame did you have there? And, hindsight advice type of dynamic, like what would you do better, different?
Yeah. I mean, there was probably between me getting a real job and getting out of the service, about 6 months in between that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say a real job, I had another job with RJ Reynolds, the tobacco company, labeling down, cigarettes on packs at the, convenience stores. But, the transition side of it, they didn't really set you up for, they had Job Corps, programs and stuff in the military at the end. But it was probably the most stressful thing that I've gone through in a long time, just because, we understand, dress right dress. We understand you don't, your belt buckle's lined with the, the sleeve of your, but in the civilian world, now I got to wear a suit jacket. What shirt goes with that? What tie goes with that? I got to buy shoes. Hell, I was only making a couple $100 a month. Right. So it's not like you have a pool of money saved up either. Cause, I was single. So it's typically every night to the bar after, or whatever when you're in garrison. But yeah, I would think that the hardest thing for me was just really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was applying for schools, like I said, Beckley, West Virginia accepted me to that. But for whatever reason, I decided not to go to that. And I just started applying for jobs.
Yeah. So, taking that experience, thinking about it now, what advice would you give your younger self to have done that better, simpler, easier, whatever the right kind of word is there for you?
Yeah, I think looking back on it now, I would have probably spent more time the year before I was going to get out of the service, to really start thinking this stuff through, and have more of a plan. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is we don't realize how difficult transition is until you're transitioning. And I think for me, that would have been the best thing, like most guys, when you're getting out, your hair starts growing, right? You're cutting your sideburns right at the top of the opening of the year. You're like pushing the limits, like I'm done with this. Versus saying, all right, like what's that next chapter going to look like for me, and where am I going to live, and how am I going to feed myself, and where am I going to go? Yeah, I would have been a little more mature in my decision making, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important for like service members to hear this from veterans, because in a way, for the military to create a program is almost counterintuitive to their goal, right? Because if they were to create a program a year before your, enlistment dates, a year before your contract is up, then they're kind of like pushing you out, right? Or they're helping you to get out. Whereas obviously their objective is to retain you. So, it's really a tough dynamic, I think, to find that middle ground, if not for just simply providing information from vets to service members like this, for example. And that's certainly a common thread that I hear, which is, and I agree with it, is to say, you just start, having some form of a plan, like before you get out, and then see, try, do your best to track toward it, ask questions, connect with other vets, etc.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's probably the most important thing. And it's funny because we're all taught the plan, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Until it comes to our own personal lives.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Taught the plan within the structure, not for your personal life, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So you start these two roles. Kind of what happens next? When do you start getting into building, into development?
Yeah. So when I first got out, right, like I said, I in between Johnson and Johnson, I was working for RJ Reynolds, which was
Mhm.
cool. I got to go to the Atlanta Motor Speedway and do some stuff. I was paying my bills. I got to live with some friends that were down in Athens, Georgia. It's by the
Mhm.
University of Georgia, so I bunked with them for a couple months. Um, but getting into building, it was kind of funny. So I was with Johnson and Johnson. I was training neuroorthopedic spine surgeons spinal implant techniques for J&J, right? Which moved me to New Jersey,
Mm.
right? And I have to say, I mean, it was a great experience, but neurosurgeons, no offense to your neurosurgeon out there, orthopedic surgeons are some of the most egotistical people you ever meet, right? If you're not a
Mm.
doctor, you're nobody in those worlds. So, and it was straight commission, and I'll get into
Mm.
my transition into the service, but because the timing of September 11th was on
Yeah.
this, so I'm 4 or 5 years in. It's great, making multiple six figures. It's straight commission with it. But what started happening is Johnson and Johnson would give you a territory, and that territory would have 15 hospitals. Like I had the Hospital for Joint Disease, I had New Brunswick Hospital, which is J&J's headquarters area in New Brunswick, New Jersey, Hunterdon Inn Hospital, all through New Jersey, and then Stony Brook on the other side in Long Island. And J&J says you need to sell. Go in, you're in the operating room, you're training your surgeons, right? Surgeon has a case, and it's the 80-20 rule. 20%, 80% of all your business comes from 20% of the surgeons, because some people are just in the OR all the time. So you go to, I'll never forget, Dr. Reish and Dr. Von der Schmutz was his name. And I'll never forget, I walked in, I said, listen, everybody's trained. We've done this case 100 times over the last 4 years. I have a new doctor trying to use, the same system at Hunterdon. I need to make sure I'm in his case to help him get his nurses and everything trained up. And he point blank looked at me and said, Dave, if you're not here, I'm calling your competitor. Because I could care less about that other doctor. This patient is my responsibility. And this was like a 6-level spine case. So, it's a
Mm.
good 6, 7, 8 hour case, maybe longer. Right. And he was right.
Mm.
Right. But here I make commission.
Right.
So this was kind of the ethical side of things. So I started thinking to myself, well, if I'm not here and he goes to my competitor, that's like $100,000 out of my income if he doesn't let me back in.
Mm.
Versus this guy may not even like it.
Yeah.
Or want to use it. So what do? That was the ethical side of it, right?
Yeah.
And
Tough.
that kind of tore at me, because I tried doing it the right way and saying, hey, because everybody was trained, they really don't need me there until things don't work.
Right. Right.
Screw, strip, or whatever. It's the same stuff like in construction, man. Like you put a screw in, it can strip in.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're trying to take old hardware out to replace something that broke, and it strips. You're using a regular drill and a stainless steel bit, and you're trying to get it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those are all special kits that we carry. Long story short, that started wearing on me. The other thing to wear on me, straight commission, you get called in the middle of the night, a trauma accident, some poor kid wrecked on a motorcycle, broke their neck, or, diving in the pool, break their neck. And I'll never forget, went in, and all I'm doing is sitting there saying, please get blood on my screw. Because if they touch it, they just bought that $10,000 screw, right? That's how I get paid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And unfortunately they passed on the table, and I'm inside pissed off because I just got up in the middle of the night. I've been here for 6 hours and I didn't make a dime. Sun's coming up and I got another case in an hour I got to go to, right? Yeah. That type of thing. But I'll never forget, I walked by the operating room, and the family was sitting there. And here I'm feeling bad I didn't make money. Right. They have no idea that their son or, just passed.
Mm-hmm.
So this was all starting to build up on me. So with that said, I was living in Jersey City, Hoboken area for at that time. I started buying and flipping properties. I was kind of just done with the medical field. I didn't like it. I didn't feel appreciated. I don't need people saying they're not going to use me, when they know. It's just, it was, it just sucks. You don't want to be that.
All of what you just said is ridiculously tough spot to be in.
Yeah, it's very tough, especially if you have ethics and morals, right?
Yep.
And you got to feed yourself.
Yep.
I wasn't living in Central America where you can rent, a 1-bedroom apartment for $250. Everything was thousands of dollars for a studio.
Yeah, I hear you.
But long story short, I started flipping properties in Jersey City, and that was going along. And then I got bigger britches, and I drove out to Pennsylvania, and I did my first spec home. Person next to me did a spec home. His name's Ron C. Schultz. Did a modular. I'm still putting on my sheetrock, and he's turning over the keys, to the customer. And his house looked just as nice as mine, except mine wasn't finished. But it's kind of a funny story. My parents grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Ron's wife, Sandy, grew up across the street from my dad in Johnstown. Because we got to talking when I was there, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like modular, you're bringing in the boxes and all that. And somehow we put that together. Oh, where are you from? John. Oh, my family's from John. Dave, that. And next thing you know, so I ended up volunteering my time when I wasn't in the OR and doing so. I said, if I'm not doing my cases and selling, doing my regular job, I said, I want to work for you for free. I want to learn this. He was getting older, and they were going to retire. So they had nothing to lose. I wasn't going to be a competitor with them. But that's how I ended up learning about modular and construction. So
before I want to pause you there because I want to take a step back. First of all, lots of questions, but when you started doing flips while you were still in the medical industry, how did you get attuned to what you needed to do? The how, the why, the where.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great question. I have no idea. I just did it. I'm like,
Awesome.
you know what?
Awesome.
I knew other people flipping homes. One of my best friends in Jersey City was a realtor, and he was doing some property. So I think that's kind of where the bug kind of came from. Okay. And my first flips were just like, 1-bedroom apartments. They weren't overly difficult. When we got into doing, bigger houses and things like that, it becomes a little more risky and difficult. But I kept it really small in the beginning because I couldn't do a full-time project. And back then we didn't have the immigration things going on now. So you could hire people off the side of the street to do regular labor work. It was different.
Yeah. Wow. So like you started with, sounds like, right, apartments, whatever. And that's what let you, I guess, gain at least some form of understanding to go into your first spec home.
Yeah. Well, and again, remember, I grew up framing, working on a job site before I went into service, my summers and weekends. So I was familiar with it. And if you recall, I said, I don't want to ever do this again in my life.
Yeah, I do recall. And I was about to ask, one was like, if you were actually able to leverage that kind of experience, like that did help, which sounds like you just said it did. And then I wonder if while you're doing that, did you remember, high school days of saying, I'm never doing this?
Oh, all the time. All the time, especially in the wintertime when it was happening. But, but also you only know what you know, you know what you don't know. Right. And, back then that seemed hard and painful. But when I got in boot camp, holy shit, that was hard and painful. Right. And AIT and the structure. So you only know what you know. So all of a sudden framing and stick building, I'm on my own. My own boss. I didn't have to worry about it. So it wasn't the same way. I found a new love for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So how did you put up the first round of capital that you needed to do that first flip or that first spec home?
So it's funny enough. The first one I did, I had some money saved up because I was doing pretty well at J&J. But as I moved forward, I started using banks to finance it. I would just go into a local bank, say, hey, listen, I want to buy this property. I'm looking at doing X, Y, Z to it. Here's going to be the value. And, you had to give them the loan to value ratio, right? And as long as you could prove out the loan to value ratio, they would lend you the money on. So it was just local banks right in the community because same thing, Hoboken, Jersey City, all of that stuff was just growing rapidly. Right. So the prices were going up. So the banks weren't very scared of it. I wasn't working on slim margins, so to speak.
Right.
I wasn't making a killing either, but I'd walk away with 20 grand, 10 grand, in theory, after I count my own time.
Right. But I mean, that's how it goes, right? You on a smaller scale until you're able to scale, right? That operation.
Correct.
Thinking back also to another thing you mentioned in terms of spreadsheets, how are you proving these to the banks? Was it not spreadsheets?
Oh, it was. You're catching me now. Yeah. I mean, of course I had to do the basic stuff, but I can't stand it. A one-page spreadsheet or, that says, painting this much, caulking this much, trim this much. I can handle that.
Fair enough.
You start adding formulas and all that crap to it, forget it.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right. Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'm with you. All right, cool. So then you get to your first spec home, you meet this person that is doing modular, and that's kind of your introduction to modular. You started like, I guess I'll call it interning, shadowing, whatever you want to, use there. Well, to walk us through what that process was like.
Yeah, is the first time was I was just working on one of his houses because he had several different spec homes that he was building. So I didn't even get to see a modular set other than the one that happened next to my house. But by the time I got to know him, it was already long past that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just understanding the process of buttoning up a modular home. Right.
Yeah.
It's the same as a site build home. It's just a different process on how you put it together and how you finish it. Right.
Yeah.
So, for me, it was, I was like a sponge just trying to, absorb all of this and go, all right, well, this doesn't take the full loads of crews that you need. Mind you, I'm still doing J&J. Right.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, all right, well, I can do this in half the time of what it takes for a site build. I can still do my corporate job, which pays me money. Right. Because this is not paying me money at the moment. And so that's kind of where the love of it started coming in. Now, it's a full-time job doing a modular home, even a stick build home. It's just not as long or as tedious, or you don't need as many trades on site all the time. But yeah, I think it was just being a sponge, learning it, understanding it, how to deal with certain things, mate lines. Sometimes the foundation, all those master masons out there that can't get a foundation square or level, drives me nuts, especially in the offsite space. Causes you a problem when you got a house that's coming perfectly square and level or within, an eighth to 16th of an inch. So just be a sponge.
Yeah. And I want to also highlight, this is at a time where like modular was brand new, right? I mean, it didn't really exist at any kind of scale.
Oh, no, it existed. It's been around a long time. It was just starting to become more popular back then, right?
Yeah. That's what I meant. Yeah. In terms of like popularity. But I don't think people necessarily, because I mean, even today, it's not necessarily like widely known or understood, right?
It's not. I mean, it's growing. Believe it or not,
growing,
I think we went up, a couple percent on the scale. But yeah, there's a lot of misunderstandings between modular manufactured homes, mobile home, ADU. Right.
Sure.
I think that's kind of the difference. I think people don't really truly understand that a modular home is the same exact home as a site built home. It's just we assemble it a little differently. All the parts and pieces are all the same. No different.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's stronger than a site built home all day long.
Right. All offsite. Yeah. I'm a huge fan. I really hope it continues to kind of like gain steam.
Yeah, it is. And AI and you, I mean, listen, I used to build homes in Greenwich and all these other, but we'll get into that, but you're not limited. Your mind's limited. That's what I would say.
Yep. Awesome. So kind of let's keep going on. Like what happens next?
Yeah, so I started doing that with Ron, and as we work through that, we're getting closer to, I left Johnson & Johnson. I went with another company called Adjoin Consulting, right? And I was still doing my work with J&J because they needed me to finish and do that stuff. But I kind of had a mixed bag of things going on. So my office was actually in Hoboken, New Jersey, but most of my business was in New York City, to include the hospitals with J&J that I was working with, right? So as I'm fast forwarding, we're starting to do, I'm still doing my flips. I'm still working for Ron. I'm sitting in a barber chair, and I can't remember if this was before or after September 11th. I think it was right after. So, but I'll tell you how I got into building my first home for somebody. I'm in a barber chair in Hoboken, New Jersey. Nick, he's talking, he cutting his hair. He's talking to the other Italian guy over there. He goes, yeah, we're going to build a modular home. Oh. I build modular homes.
That's great.
And that's how it ended up happening. I ended up building his home for him, He was also the mayor of South Hackensack. So I was a little nervous. I might find myself in a garbage bag somewhere if I didn't get it right? So
or in the inn.
Yeah. But so, somewhere I'll be at the waste management, but so as I was working J&J, I was flipping homes. I started moving over to Adjoin. And this really brings us up to September 11th, right? Because all this was kind of happening at the same time. I was actually in Jersey City driving. I just pulled out literally on the river. I was like a block from my house, and so the plane hit the trade center. You could see the explosion on the right side because I was heading north. I stopped like everybody else. I looked, it felt like an eternity, but a few minutes later, my grandmother called me and said, "Hey, are you okay?" Because she knew I
Mm,
was in New York all the time. So yeah, I'm fine. I'm seeing what's happening. But long story short, I had that call. She told me that they're thinking it's a terrorist attack, right? I drove my car back just around the block, parked it. And, just like everybody else in the neighborhood, we were just kind of sitting there looking, right? And seeing what's going on. And then, you could see people evacuating, the boats coming across from the river. I
mm,
literally, out my view of my apartment was the Statue of Liberty,
mm.
unobstructed. Like
Yeah.
I could sit there at night and just stare at the Statue of Liberty. And it was absolutely amazing. So that's how close I was to the river.
Mhm.
I still had my aid bag from the service. Some things I kept,
Yeah.
right? And I still had my aid bag from from the service. I mean, the saline, none of that was still good, but I
Right.
still had an aid bag. I had bandages, I had wraps. I can't remember the name of the rolling splints you could use and all that.
Mm,
So I went down on the Hudson River and just, was watching the boats were coming across. As people were coming across, people were injured,
mm.
right? Because of the falling debris. I mean, if you're down lower Manhattan, a plane hits a building that size, there's a lot of debris.
Yeah.
And as that was going on, they were unloading, the first tower started coming down.
Mm.
Right. And of course, the world stops for a moment because, like, holy, and you're sitting there and people are mother effing the world. And we got to, I won't even get into it. But as we were helping some people off the boat, one of the fire medics had a broken, lacerated arm. She got hit by some debris. And she said, they were asking me, if I was a doctor. I said, no, I'm not a doctor. I was a combat medic, in the service. And like, well, we need your help.
Mm.
And I said, all right, I'll do it. And lo and behold, I ended up getting on a boat with the fire department and some police officers. She gave me her helmet and her aid bag. Her aid bag, the nice orange one, not one you'd wear in, a combat situation.
Mhm.
And I was on my way across the river.
Wow.
Thousands of people coming this way. I was going straight into it.
Mhm.
We went straight across, and that, if you want to know when you have a moment of like, what the hell did I just do? It was kind of like when I joined the military.
Right.
It's kind of like that, holy shit. Like, what am I thinking? Right. But yeah, we ended up, they got up to the railing right down, I don't know if you're familiar with Manhattan,
Mhm.
where that was, but there used to be a place
Yeah.
called Moran's Bar, and then you go around the corner, you got Battery Park, right? They didn't even do that. They just cut the railing where we pulled up along the seawall,
Mhm.
climbed up over. There was, I went with one of the other medics there and we started running up. I was literally on Vesey Street, if you're familiar with the area, when the second tower started coming down.
Wow.
Right. And I'll never forget it because we were there because we were helping it was this Asian guy and he had a compound fracture of his leg. He would not let go of his suitcase or his briefcase. Right.
Mhm.
He would not let go of it. And I'll never forget the other medic was just screaming at him. Right. And then finally did him with, a hard sternum rub with his knuckles. And the guy still wouldn't let go of his briefcase. And all of a sudden the rumbling started and the tower started coming down and we grabbed him by his shoulder, under his arms, and we ran with that guy.
Mm.
And for military guys out there that have been in it, you don't forget the screams of somebody with a compound fracture as his legs are bouncing off the concrete as you're running.
Mhm.
Got him back, threw him in the bus. The plume of smoke came, filled up the bus. We're all in there, right? Tried to get the doors closed, but I mean, we already had all the ashes. We were just covered in
Wow.
it. And the big scare was gas leaks. All these things were, there was
Mhm.
so much going on, man. And all you hear is the beep, beep, all the sirens, the firemen stuff, and, all their jackets. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there and was down there. And I was there for 4 days.
Wow.
And I don't know how long we go on this. I mean, we're at an hour here, but I don't want to talk too much. But the reality of it is, there wasn't very many survivors. Any.
Mhm.
There was injured people. Went down to Battery Park. That's where an aid station was at the park there. We dropped him off. They wouldn't let us go back out because our bus was too full of crap. And it wasn't sanitary whatsoever. Not that they were finding many people. I ended up finding a way to hitch myself on another ambulance that was driving in so I could get inside. I ended up getting inside and I was at Liberty One Plaza, where Brooks Brothers is. You got the Hilton Hotel. You got, I think, Century 21, Burger King on the corner. I think all those are maybe even still there. Brooks Brother was the morgue. pushed all the clothes off the table, right? And that was the morgue. So I ended up at that aid station, and when we were able to start going up on the hill, when they deemed it, it wasn't safe, but they were starting to let people go work once, because it would rumble, things would shift and move.
Wow.
These are huge buildings, man.
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine, Rick Parker, him and I were teaming up. He was just another EMT medic, disaster relief type guy. And that's all we did, man. We'd carry a litter. We'd walk to the hill, walk up the hill. They'd flag us, right? We'd have the bags. We'd body bag whatever piece we were. We'd have to look at it, mark it down, try and have some idea what it is, because they were so overwhelmed with body parts and, just trying to figure things out back at the aid station. Is there any IDs laying around? I mean, everything was, just, it was so mixed up, even if an ID was laying next to somebody, but, they're trying to identify. And that's what we did for, 3 or 4 days, just taking it back and forth. And I left out how I missed Rick. And for the viewers out there, there's, I did a documentary on this with Here Is New York. So my stuff's actually at the Trade Center. My name's in the Trade Center, the memorial. There's a video that they play. I think they rotate them of me telling my story. But I was getting my eyes cleaned out. And this is how I met Rick. And I kind of fast forward, but let's get my eyes cleaned out. And I'm laying back. The nurse is cleaning my eyes. And all of a sudden, everybody's running. You can kind of see, and people are running up the street, and then the nurse left, and I'll never forget, Rick came by and he tells me, he's like, you got to get out of here. I mean, what do we got to get out of here for? He goes, the building's coming down. I'm like, what building? He goes, this one. I was like, oh shit. Wow. I can't see. It never came down. Okay. It never came down, the building we were in, but you had all these people, the engineers, I guess, were set up. Yeah, but you sit there and everybody's running. So you're like, all right, well, I should run too. I usually don't run with the crowd, but in this case, it sounds like a good idea. Wow. But yeah, so that's how Rick and we're still great friends to today. He lives in Atlanta, but yeah, that's kind of the September 11th story. I mean, there's a bunch of different, stories there. I was there when President Bush showed up. I got pictures of him standing there with the fire chief, saying, the rest of the world's going to hear you. That's the first shift on the media that I realized when I saw what happened after that. Because the workers were saying, pretty much effing nuke them. When I watched the news, it said USA, US. And I'm like, it was not the sentiment. I'm sure it happened at some point. Maybe they grabbed that clip, but they didn't show the real feeling there. I mean, it was, it was pretty brutal. But when they flew in, I mean, you had all these snipers. I just remember looking up. I'm like, oh, there they are. Yeah. They were everywhere. But I stayed there for, 2 nights. The Coast Guard gave me a ride home on the back of one of their rubber dinghy boats, with the high speed thing. I'll never forget my back getting soaking wet. And this is kind of something that reminded me of the military. And I think a lot of people will relate to this. When I got back over to Jersey City, I haven't slept for a couple of days. I'm tired. I'm dirty. My eyes burn. I smell like all the soot and ash. And there was all these people there cheering on the rescue workers, right? It's no different than when you come home from deployment and like your family's sitting there, right? It's emotional. Yeah. You don't think it's emotional. And I'll never forget it. Like, I just had to walk straight through everybody. Like, I wanted nothing to do with them. Yeah. Nothing to do with them. And then I remember I was sleeping, that night in my own bed before I went back the next morning, and I can't remember something dropped off my bed. Dude, I jumped and ducked, like you do. Like, I was like, all right, well, that hasn't happened for years since I got back from the service, right? So I'm doing the whole crouch under my bed type thing. And I was like, all right, fuck, I got to get out of here. This ain't working. And I did. I walked straight back down, and they were not letting anybody else in the city. But I just put my regular clothes. I already had my helmet on with my lights taped on, right? And I don't know if I didn't have a don't F with me look to me, but they let me walk right on the boat.
That's usually how it works, right? You just go like where you're going, and people don't ask questions generally.
It's kind of like the 1,000-mile stare. When you're on deployment, you get back. Like, it's just, I think people could see it, and went back over for another day and a half, and then FEMA told us we all had to leave. Because I wasn't a public official or a firefighter.
Right. So I was thinking that first day where you went in, via that boat. Did you have like a mask on?
Nothing.
I mean, I picture it and imagine it, and you kind of mentioned it too, right? Like, how are you even breathing?
I was in tennis shoes and shorts.
Wow.
I was a consultant. But
Wow,
yeah,
that's
no,
wild.
I was in tennis shoes and shorts when I went over there.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, I had some American Eagle pants, right? I got it while I was over in the city, and somebody had a picture of it. American Eagle is based in Pittsburgh here, believe it or not. I think my mom or some I don't know. All of a sudden, like after this, I got like a box of just free pants and clothing. But yeah, but no, I ended up just getting stuff there. I mean, listen,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
stores
Yeah.
were all open,
Yeah.
some of the things that people don't think about during that time is where do all these rescue workers go to the bathroom?
Right.
They were imported Johns brought in, and everything wasn't set up. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we were going up the Hilton Hotel, a Millennial
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it's called there. I mean, I'd go up to the 30th floor just to find a clean toilet and kick the door open. Right?
Wow.
What do you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
It's that kind of
Yeah.
shit. Stuff was happening. It took a
And
couple days for things to get established.
sure. Yeah. Of course. Especially in that chaos. Where were you sleeping in Hilton?
No, well, I did lay down on one of the beds for a little bit, but no, mainly I was mainly just laying on the floor in the aid station.
Yeah. Wow.
If but there wasn't a whole lot of sleep, dude. Your adrenaline's going. I mean,
Right.
it's noisy, and there was still all this hope that you were going to find somebody.
Mm. Yeah.
You start hearing, all right, we hear, everybody quiet. You hear banging, right? But
Yeah.
pipes clack. You just didn't know. But yeah, I mean, it was still a search and rescue mission. It was
Mm-hmm.
not just just a search or rescue mission. We were looking for survivors.
Yeah. 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 Wow. That's an unbelievable story. Definitely gonna. Is that available? Like your story.
I can send you the link to that if people want to listen to it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
please.
video. It's a video too, dude. You see how much
Awesome.
hair I have. That was 1 year afterwards. I was asked, and I got to speak on the South Lawn of the White House about it, which was
Wow.
cool.
Yeah. Please share that, and I'll also add it in the show notes so people can access it. That's a pretty amazing thing. Pretty amazing thing.
Yeah, and it's a good thing to look at because you can see a bunch of stories from people that were there, which is cool.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Wow. So what happens next then?
Yeah. So, I mean, literally from there, I kind of had that aha moment. I was done with Johnson & Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
I was done with consulting. Like I said, I just got my first job building a home for the mayor of South Hackensack, who owned the barbershop in Hoboken. Right. And I lived to tell about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was it. I started building houses, man. And I just set up a simple website, and typically when you do a job, it can lead to another job because somebody
Mm-hmm.
sees what you're doing. Yeah, and that's how my developer career really began, just from that one sales job in a barbershop. But
Wow.
yeah, I quit Johnson & Johnson. I quit, joined consulting is what it was called back then, and started doing that full time, flipping properties and building that house. And then it finally went to just being a full-time builder.
Yeah, amazing. So were those mainly, or all of them, were they modular?
Yeah.
Wow.
Everything I did was either modular, panelized. As my career went, it was mostly modular.
Right.
First house was a stick, right? And I learned a lot of financial lessons on that house. The second one was a modular, and I still learned a lot of financial lessons, even on that house for the mayor, right? I ate a lot of my own money up, underestimating what the true costs were going to be. But then, it started ramping up, moving along, and 2003, 4, 5, 6, I was averaging just, 6, 7 custom homes a year, modular. Then we started doing some hybrid stuff, and met my wife, who I actually knew my wife for a while, but we started dating, right? She was single. I was single for the first time type thing. And life was good. And then we got married in 2007, 2008, the crash hit. The market hit, right? And I was doing all modular then. One of the things that scared me about what happened with this is we lost our home, right? Foreclosed. I had some rental properties that I flipped that I just turned into rentals, lost those. And here's the thing. Everybody says bet on yourself. You can't bet on yourself. You got to bet on the data, right? I'll get another. We didn't know 2008 was really happening yet, right? It's just all of a sudden the banks were calling the loans for the customer. I have a contract with my customer. They have a contract with me. I have a contract with the manufacturer. The manufacturer has a contract with me. The manufacturer does not have a contract with the customer. Customer gives me money. I give it to the manufacturer for the build. manufacturer goes belly up, right?
Wow.
You know,
Yep.
all of a sudden you're out, 30, 40% of the money for the entire build.
Yep.
They go belly up. Now you have a customer not so happy with you.
Yep.
Even though it's not your, in theory,
Yeah.
it's not your fault, right? I mean, this is the supply chain.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it went belly up. My wife was working at Van Heusen, I think it was at the time, 2008. We just had our twin daughters born.
Wow.
She got laid off from Van Heusen. So like it was just, that 2008 to 2012 was probably financially the hardest time in our lives, especially now you got babies and you need healthcare and your business is drying up. Like it's hard.
Yeah. That's brutal.
It is. And it's hard to stay positive and it's hard to keep moving forward on that. But, that's kind of, everything passes.
Going back, and I'm going to ask you about that, Pierre, but going back to that first or second, whatever home, the one that you did for the mayor, and you said even on that was your second, right? Even on that, you had learned financial lessons, et cetera. How is there a way a like first time or just a new, generally speaking, builder could understand that without just going through those pains themselves and kind of learning?
You know what? It's truly understanding the process, right? And it's having your markup and overhead correct.
Right.
When you're starting out, you want to keep your prices low. You say, all right, I'm going to do 10% overhead, 10% profit. That's 20%. That's what a lot of people do, right? And versus, that's way too low because there's not a lot of room or air, for error in those numbers. That's kind of the biggest thing. I think for anybody starting out, get a mentor. Get somebody that's successful, that you're not competing with, and say, hey, listen, I'm just looking for a mentor here.
Yeah.
Because if you have somebody that already understands how to price the numbers, because 10% and 20% on here and here doesn't work all the time, especially on site work, right? Because we all know the headaches are in the site typically.
Yeah.
You can control everything from the concrete plate up, right? But yeah, I think the biggest thing to me is to get a mentor, and that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, would there be a way, like a means of methods, if you were to just put a contingency number in there, like a percentage of contingency that would, I guess, on average, cover any BS that would occur out of your control?
Yeah, I mean, listen, contingency numbers are always great, right? Or you do a cost plus contract,
right? Or cost plus, right? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do all of those. A lot of times customers don't like cost plus because you just keep spending and they got to keep paying, right? It's all depending on, unless you have a good reputation and you've been doing it for a long time, then people buy into that. But, typically when we're building, we were marking up when we started really getting good at this and we were starting to really put homes in the ground at a larger scale. The goal would always be we mark it up 30 to 35%. With the goal of having a profit margin of 20 to 25% by the time you're done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's your contingency money. We always know you're going to have something happen. There isn't a perfect job out there. And we kind of found for our market, what we were doing, we were at that 35% mark. Some houses you'd make a little bit more. Other houses you'd make a lot less. You just never know. You find that turtle that's been missing for 1,000 years and, they come out and shut you down for a month or whatever. But that's, to me, that's, that was a lesson learned for me. Because, you think 10%, when you're looking at $500,000 or $300,000, wherever your market is, right? We were in New England, so nothing was less than $500,000. A 3,000 square foot home is $1.5 million, $2 million just for a basic, starter type home, depending on where you're at along the coast. So that profit margin became, or as you say, that contingency we just built into our pricing model.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Great advice. So going back to kind of where I paused you there, the financial crisis, how did you, obviously now in hindsight, how did you end up pushing through that?
Yeah, a little bit of bourbon, but no, it was so there was a couple things happening. One, obviously I had to get a lawyer, which I didn't ever think I would ever need other than to review contracts. But I had clients that were unhappy because their money's gone. I don't have that kind of money to get, I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars. I take it very personal, and I have jobs that are underway and the banks just shut shit down. Right. But so had to work through all of that, paid every penny back, every penny, and we're able to recover some money from the bankruptcy, from the manufacturers.
Sure.
But that's over the course of years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but really it's just a matter of driving forward. I was still flipping my homes. I wasn't building, right? So that still kept us going. My wife ended up getting a job in Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
right, with Eastern Mountain Sports. She was the senior purchasing director for Eastern Mountain Sports, Van Heusen. She'd already played at an executive level.
Mm-hmm.
And my mentor was in Connecticut. So I
Mm-hmm.
called my mentor. I said, listen, I don't want to do this, but I have kids, I have healthcare. And he said, well, why don't you come be my partner? Getting older, he wanted to retire,
Mm-hmm.
right? We had this whole plan in place. So that's kind of how we ended up getting out of it. So we had a
Cool.
little bit of a blessing in disguise, went there, set up a new office in Fairfield, Connecticut. Main office was up in East Lyme. And then we opened another office up in Rhode Island. But the idea was I would come in, we'd open up a new design studio in Fairfield, Connecticut that we would sell out of. I would run the Fairfield market. He would run the Northern Connecticut market, right? And it became really successful in doing that. Eventually, you know, it worked into where, you know, I started becoming a partner and having ownership and things of that nature as we moved it forward. Yeah. And that's kind of how we dug ourselves out of it, you know? And so now I'm sharing in the profit margin. Some years, you know, we would do, you know, 40, 50, 60 houses a year. Other years, you know, we do 12, 15, but the market changed from your simple 2-box ranch to or your Cape Cod, your New England Cape, to now in my market, we're in New Canaan, Greenwich, Connecticut, Fishers Island, Block Island, right? Building a lot of more custom and higher end homes, which take longer than a simple home.
Right.
But the profit margins are bigger.
Yeah. Wow.
So
That's amazing. So what in that journey do you kind of take as, I don't know, like hindsight advice for someone who's trying to get there?
Yeah. You know how they say it in the service, right? Focus on the 3 feet in front of you.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
Right. Manage what you can manage with the 3 feet in front of you. Right. You know, if you want to do like what we did and actually grow, you know, and be more of a custom builder that's almost on a developer scale of housing, you know, you gotta have systems and processes. The sooner you put a system and a process together, and it's like you're saying, well, I'm just starting out. I don't even know what the process is yet, but a mentor does. And you believe in that system and process, then that's how you scale. You cannot scale just by thinking, all right, well, I'll sell another one, I'll sell another one, I'll sell another one, and think you'll get it done. You got to start putting processes, and you got to build your team.
Yeah.
Your trade team is the most important thing you have. And the more business you do with them, when shit gets tough or you lose your ass on something, they'll take a hit with you, knowing that they have 20 more houses coming, right?
Sure.
That's kind of how this works. So, you know, everybody wants to shop the lowest price. Everybody wants to put a bid out there, you know, next job, you know, a lot of architects in that area particularly want to sit there and nickel and dime, you know, change order Fridays. That's what they call it, change order Fridays. So, you know, because there's a lot of money in change orders, but the reality of it is we found our success because we built a team of trades within each region. And if you're feeding their family and they're helping feed your family, you know, yeah, sometimes they get a little whirly on their pricing and they try and up it and this and that. But I mean, we all do. I think it's just, you got to build a relationship. And if you have core trades that understand your product and your process, then you can scale. But without them, you can't scale.
And when you say, you know, your team of trades, you're talking about kind of go to external. When I say external, meaning like they're not internal to your company, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So it was just, you'd be going to them every time for consistent business. And that was like kind of, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
awesome.
definitely. You know, I mean, listen, carrying all these people on your payroll is, you know, brutally hard.
Yeah.
Brutally hard. So, you know, and it's costly. So to me, you know, if you can 1099 and keep people off your payroll, it's better because you don't want all their liability, right? You know, if the plumbing breaks, you know, or shit eventually goes wrong, like you can have it fall on you. And a lot of people like to have all their own in-house stuff. But yeah, there's a reason the big developers use the unions and the trades. They don't have their own in-house people. They have project managers.
Yeah. Agreed. I agree with that approach.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. And that's great advice. Where did, wow, why am I drawing a blank on this? Mass timber. Sorry. Where did mass timber come in? come in the fold?
Yeah. So, you start building in the higher end areas like New England and,
Mhm.
along the coast, people don't want just a straight, modular. They want vaulted ceilings, it's
Sure.
kind of a hybrid approach.
I see.
So we started designing frame walls or, whatever we could. And if they wanted the big ceilings with the wood timber, we
Yeah.
would design it into our structures. Right.
Cool.
So it really just because it was kind of client driven. And then it also taught us that we can bring two systems together.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to that point, like just generally speaking, concept of mass timber, I've been seeing a few, like I mean, very few, but a few projects that are mass timber that are like mid high rise.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on those in terms of its like capability or viability, like
Yeah.
to scale, generally speaking?
But not burned down.
And I mean, whatever, yeah, burn
So
down or just
listen,
cost or whatever.
we saw what happens to a steel building when it gets hot,
Right.
right?
Right.
September 11th.
Yeah.
Mass timber is an amazing product. Just even on a fire rating, because that's the first thing a lot of people say.
Right.
But I always say, listen, go have a backyard bonfire, take a log, and try and light that log with your match. You're never going to do it, right? Because it
Right.
chars. Even if you did get it lit, it chars, and that log burns for a long time. That's the value of mass timber, in a building that's on fire. The downside is it chars, and if you do get the fire out in time, you might have, that char smell for a while, but the building's still there. But I think with mass timber, they're doing more mid-rise, not so much high-rise, right?
Mid-rise,
I think, 12, 20, I think 22 stories is the highest. I gotta look.
That's what I was saying. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
20s.
Yeah. It's like anything else. It's a solid structure. I would rather be in a building that's made of mass timber and try and get out than being a building that's steel and try and get out.
Yeah. Well, safety, I mean, valid point and good to learn to understand. But like safety aside, like more on just a business perspective, is mass timber like a viable approach, or is it more? Yeah, interesting. Cool.
It is. So, I mean, I don't know if you Google it or what, but if you look, the mass timber industry and manufacturers in mass timber is the fastest growing offsite industry in America.
Cool.
It's huge. And now you're using mass timber hybrid approach to make modulars, right? And, so the more manufacturing comes online, the more cost effective it's going to be. Yeah. But the reality of it is, if you've ever been in a mass timber building, it's nice.
It is nice.
It's warm.
Very nice.
Education departments use it because so much research has shown that being in a concrete classroom versus a wood mass timber room helps people be more creative and more open, feel more comfortable. Look at the wood behind you versus this blue thing behind me, right? It's warm. And I think that's there's a lot of scientific knowledge mentally about how it helps the workforce, how it helps students. If you're sitting in a cubicle all day, wouldn't you rather sit in a beautiful cubicle with mass timber, right? So I think you're going to see more and more of it as it moves forward now.
Yeah. That's awesome. Like culturally, or how it helps your just psyche, I 100% agree. But I didn't know it was like the business perspective. I hope to continue seeing that grow, because I think they're beautiful buildings in general, and obviously give you that aesthetic while you're in it and you feel it.
Yeah, no, for sure. That is probably the biggest value. And as we get into this sustainability, carbon neutral world that we're living in, right? Depending on where that goes, a lot of the mass timber buildings have that they sequester, or whatever they call the word, the carbon out of the air. So if you're a commercial builder out there, like these are all important things. They're real. You got to deal with them.
Very cool. Yeah. So before we get into your podcast, I'll pause right here in terms of your civilian professional journey. And let's hit translatable skills, military to built environment.
Military to built environment. It takes processes, right? It's a process, and it takes, attention to detail. And I think if you're going to translate anything from the military into the building world, if you want to be successful, you need to know the process. You need to pay attention to detail, and you need to have good work ethics, or it's never going to get done on time.
Yep. Soft skills that
takes
need to be
leadership.
highlighted. Yep. Awesome.
Yep.
So when did and how did the podcast kind of come to light? Your podcast?
Yeah. So when we had our development company in New England, right, and our building company, we had a lady named Angel who did our social media for us. This is around the same time Facebook Live was becoming popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I walk into the office, I'm a partner now, walk into the office, I get called into the room, say, hey, Angel's on the phone. Do you have a minute? I said, okay, I got a minute. She goes, Dave, how are you? I said, I'm doing good. She goes, I need you to do something for me. I'm like, all right, what do you need? She goes, we need to do videos for social media, for Facebook. Sure, we can hire somebody to do that. No problem. She goes, no, you have to do it. I'm like, I have to do it. She goes, I said, why do I have to do it? She goes, because you got the personality. You come across like you know what you're doing, right? Just talking wise, like she's, knowledge wise. And I guess she saw something I didn't see. But that's how I ended up getting into it. I'll never forget. And she goes, she goes, oh, they talked me into doing it. I said, all right. She goes, and one more thing. I said, what's that? She goes, you have to do it live. I said, you got to be kidding, live. So anyhow, fast forward, I ended up going down to a house we were building in Norwich, Connecticut. And I stood in that house in the kitchen. And, these videos, are still out there. And I finally, after the plumber left, the electrician left, walking around making sure nobody can hear me. I feel like an ass. I did. I said, hey, everybody, this is Dave Cooper. And I just started filming myself and did it live. And
That's
did
awesome.
it. And I stayed consistent with it. And the funny thing was, I was about to be like, this is dumb. I don't want to do it. Like, it's not getting that many subscribers because everybody thinks you have to have subscribers, but it's more about the views, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're builders. People want what they want when they want you. We're a destination. Unless you're Matt Reisinger or one of the Build Show and stuff, and you're doing all this educational stuff, consumers want you when they want you. They could care less about you in between any of that. So our jobs are not to get eliminated, right? So that's why we started doing video. How do we not get eliminated? Because everybody looks online first. And if you're not online and you're not doing video and you're not putting yourself out there and you're trying to be all canned messages, and you're going to lose versus the people that put themselves out there and talk about the problems and the good stuff. Long story short, I did that. And it was about 6 months in. I was doing it like twice a week. And I finally was like, oh, I'll just call these the Modular Home Minute. They were really like 5-10 minutes long sometimes, right? But it was the Modular Home Minute show. Sitting in our design center, I was at the main design center, and all of a sudden, this husband and wife comes in, and I'm walking through. We have one of our sales consultants there, right? Our building consultants, we called them, and they go, "Hey, you're the guy on TV."
That's amazing,
right? And he's looking, and the guy looks at me, goes, my wife loved that house. What house was that? The white one with the white subway tile backsplash in the kit, right? And they just went on and on and on. The business development guy's looking at me like, dude, get out of here. This is my sale, right? Like, but what I realized is because that started happening more regularly. People were buying us before even buying our house. They were They were selling me now.
Yep.
And so we went from the first sales call, meeting, walk in the door, to the third in the same first day, to the point where we were taking checks same day sometimes.
Wow.
Right. So that was the power. That's how I got started in video. So we started doing it. Now that caused some riffraff in the office because everybody would ask for me because I was, we had a, I'm running, Fairfield office, partly in Northern Connecticut, partly in our Rhode Island office. So I'm kind of managing these, and we have people, but so we have all these, building consultants, and but people were asking because I'm the one on video. So that kind of a little bit of, but it worked out just fine, right? Because I'd come in, I'd do my spiel and be like, oh, they're going to take such good care of you, but if you have a problem, you know where to find me. I'm on YouTube or whatever. But that's how we got into it. So fast forward, 10 years now or whatever it was, 15, almost 12 years. About a month before COVID hit, we decided we were going to part ways because now my daughters are getting older. We have a son now. My son's 9, right? I got twin daughters that are 17. And we were just kind of feeling the urge to be around family. We've never been around family with our kids. And they were pushing, and, and a partnership was kind of dragging on longer than I wanted it to. There was all these other factors happening. So we decided that we were going to, part ways, and they were going to buy me out. We had another guy that came in, Scott, and Scott was more prime for it because he lived right there in Rhode Island and Westerly. And like, so it wasn't like it was a hard knockout, we're leaving, type thing. It was like, we had a whole transition plan, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
Scott bought into my partnership. I took my, right, blah, blah, blah. So long story short, we finalized that a month before COVID hit.
Wow.
And then COVID hit.
Wow.
Right. We're living off exit 73 on 95, dead center between Boston and New York City. And so COVID hit, and my wife just looked at me randomly, goes, why don't we just sell our house and buy a motorhome? Huh? Now, my wife is not the camping type. She'll go camping, but not for extended periods of time. But with that said, the other thing that was driving that is we had people leaving New York City and Boston in droves, wanted out of the city because everybody was scared of COVID, and they were just offering ungodly cash money for houses, right?
Yeah.
So we had an incentive, and that was part of the incentive to move quickly and, capitalize, because we were planning on moving anyhow.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So we bought a motorhome. We traveled in that motorhome, my wife and 3 kids, for a little over almost a year and 3/4, almost 2 years across the country. And during that time, I started, Dave Cooper Live. My wife named it. Just call it Dave Cooper Live.
Yeah.
Because I was already doing the live. Nobody was really doing live. It made sense. I was one of the first ones to get LinkedIn Live.
Yeah.
Because I was able to prove from Facebook and others that I was always doing live, and they had a vetting period, right? Always going live. And, it was funny. We'd just be traveling and be like, oh, I think so-and-so has a factory here. Let's stop in. Right. We'd stop in and I'd live stream from the factory. Right.
That's awesome.
But it started catching on. That's how Dave Cooper Live was born. So we kept doing that everywhere we go. My kids, and plus we got free places to park. We're in factory parking lots, this kind of stuff, free power, all of that. But just kept doing it. And before you know it, people started calling us saying, because everybody's locked down. We had a captive audience, but we weren't locked down. We were just traveling all over the country, East Coast, West Coast, North, South. We just started streaming, and I kept doing my show. And about a month into it, I said on my regular show, I said, hey, Rick, we're going to live stream 6 days a week for a year.
Yep.
So that's what we did. I saw something with Casey Neistat. He did this crazy thing for like 2 years, a film every day. I'm like, I can do a year, 6 days live streaming. It was really hard. It was almost a marriage buster when my wife heard me say that. We're in a motorhome, so there's not really anywhere to go.
Right.
But we did. And so we had guests on, just like we're doing this podcast, but we always do it live, like you were on our show. And then when we went to factories, that would be one of our live shows that we would do. So our whole trip became part of the Dave Cooper Live. It took us all over the country, but my kids got tired of going to some factories after a while. But yeah, I was just having fun, man. I was hanging out with people that were thinking differently and forward thinking. And, there isn't a better job in the world than hanging out with people that are trying to make a difference.
That's really awesome. So cool that you did that during that COVID period. I mean, that's pretty much taking advantage of what was going on in the world. It's the incredible experience. How did you end up back in Pittsburgh? Like, did you drive across and back, or how did that work?
Adam, my kids are lucky to be alive. We're sitting in Florida at Santa Rosa Beach, feet in the sand. Santa Rosa, Destin, it's like one of the top 5 beaches in the world on the Panhandle, right between Pensacola and Destin. And so I'm sitting there, and I said to the kids, I'm like, where do you guys want to move to? Oh, we want to move to Pittsburgh. I'm like, you want to move to where? But that's how we ended up back here. My family's here. Yeah. Me personally, I'm really happy I'm back. But I'm kind of done with I was done with the Northeast. I'm like, what? This sandy beach and nice weather, 3/4 of the year is awesome. Yeah. That it was our daughters that decided. They're both competitive ice hockey players.
Okay.
Their team finished 3rd in the nation last year at Nationals. They're going for the title again this year. So that was another reason they wanted to get back into hockey. They were missing their friends, that type of thing. So there's more to it, but it was their idea.
Got it. Yeah.
And I kicked and screamed like a baby the whole way here. I'm like, you guys are nuts. Do you know how much it rains in Pittsburgh?
Wow. That's a really awesome story, man. I think that brings us to kind of today, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Awesome. And anything I didn't ask that you want to add?
No, I think we're just getting warmed up. What do we got? Exactly. 2 more hours? No,
just about.
No, I think we covered everything. And Definitely enjoyed the conversation. You made me
Awesome.
think, like, when I think about veterans who build, I wish I would have went a little more deep into some of the military stuff, but I just wasn't on my mind. I thought we were getting into the building stuff more too, so I think it was awesome. I hope I gave your listeners some valuable information and knowledge, and I'm a resource, man. Our channel is a resource of who's doing what around the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So closing out, I got final two questions. One is going to be, what's your wellness practice look like?
My wellness practice is running.
Awesome.
I don't do a lot of meditation, but running, I love working out.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at my waist, you wouldn't think that today, but I've been traveling a lot. But yeah, my wellness thing is I try and get all my hours in during the day working. I go to the gym typically 5, 6 a.m. in the morning. And then in the evenings, I find it very important. I try and spend my time with my kids at hockey. Our family still has dinner probably 4 or 5 nights a week at the table, mandatory.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yep. Last one is going to be, any book or books you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that. For a guy who doesn't read, but guess what? They're all on video, as well. So one of my favorite books is called The One Thing. And it's just that we always talked about it earlier. I said, focus on your 3-foot space, right?
Yep.
And the one thing really, it's about creating habits to be successful, in your life and in your business, and really doing things with purpose. It's so easy to go here, you have all these competing priorities, and it's kind of a book that helps you take a step back. Let's put these in an order that I can eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
The One Thing, it's a great book.
Awesome. Yeah. Wasn't familiar with it. Can add it to my list. Going to be in the show notes as well. Dave, thank you very much for joining the show today and sharing your story. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Adam, thank you for having me, man. Hey, listen, go listen to Adam's podcast on my show as well. Don't forget to put that in there.
Please do. I'll drop that in the show notes as well. Awesome.
Right,
Take
cool.
care, everyone. Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.